What up, what up? Back this week with the Pop Punk Pod. This week we got the album What You Don't See by The Story So Far. This album was released in March of 2013. This week I got my co-host Tanner with us.
What up, what up?
And we're just going to be talking about the album and talking about anything that we want to about What You Don't See. So, this album actually is one of my, not least favorites, but like, it's not high up. People are going to hate me for saying this because I feel like this album is like one of The Story So Far's like highest, like people love this one a whole lot as opposed to like the other albums for some reason. But this one for me, just like, I was listening back through it a couple times again and I realized that I didn't like love it as much as all their other albums. I don't know. Like I didn't like, it wasn't as influential for me, I guess. I'm curious to hear what, because you said that you really like, what did you say? How this one was more influential for you or something? As opposed
so
to
this
Proper
album,
Dose?
this was kind of my gateway drug into The Story So Far. So I don't think I'd ever heard of them before this. So for context, for me, 2013, I would have been either a sophomore or a junior in high school. Probably a sophomore. I probably didn't listen to this album right when it came out, but this is the album that I first heard a few of the songs on. And I'll go through those when we're going through track by track, but this was the album that like actually got me into The Story So Far, and then I started looking at their other albums. So I agree with you that it's not my favorite. There's like one or two songs that I really like that I'll go into. But overall, I agree with you. It's not my favorite album, but for me, it was the most influential because this is what got me into them. And like this was also during just my era of like defining or figuring out what genre of music I liked and why I liked it. Right. And so this album kind of played a big part in that. So that's one of the reasons why it's influential, but I agree with you. It's not my favorite. It's not like their best album totally, but in my opinion. But anyway,
Same.
So those are some of my thoughts.
I think Self-Titled for me was like what really got me into them. And I think it was just because Nerve and Heavy Gloom were those singles at the time in 2015, and you were playing them upstairs on the stereo. And that's like when I first connected The Story So Far with like their music, I guess. Like I don't know, like that's when I was like, oh, this is The Story So Far. Like, and so their Self-Titled album for me, I feel like people don't really like that album for some reason, but like I like understand why, but I don't know. That one for me was like what sold me on my love for The Story So Far. What I know from the cover art actually is I'm pretty sure Jordan Pundik from New Found Glory drew the cover like of the album of What You Don't See, and I believe that the drummer Cyrus of that band of New Found Glory colored it. I don't know if I just heard that from Porter or if, well, I know I heard it from an interview that The Story So Far did, and I thought that was just kind of cool. I bet they were probably just like on tour with New Found Glory and just was like, we need an album cover art for this thing, and so he just like drew something up and then they used it. But I think it's an interesting looking thing.
Yeah, I know what you're saying. That's funny though. That's interesting. If it was actually made by those members from The Stories or New Found Glory, that's interesting to hear.
Yeah.
When I first saw the album cover, it was like kind of disturbing to me at first, and I was like, "Whoa, like what the heck? This is kind of creepy and weird looking." But I liked some of the different songs. But another random thing before we jump into other stuff is this was also like my first entry or introduction to more like the emo side of pop punk, as opposed to something like Neck Deep or State Champs. It's a little more upbeat. This is definitely takes a little bit more of like the emo side of pop punk, kind of a lot similar with like Belmont's Self-Titled album and stuff like that. It's got a kind of different vibe. So I think that's also fitting for the album artwork is a little more like, whoa, what the heck?
Yeah. Track one's called Things I Can't Change. The first thing that stands out to me in this song was the bass solo at the beginning. Well, it's kind of a solo. It's just like, it's not really a solo. It's just, I don't know. I also like listen to bass parts a lot more too. Just kind of all over, but I guess more with The Story So Far because I really do love the bassist Kellen Capener in this band. At least at the time he was in the band. Yeah, I really love just kind of the growl of it and just like the low. It's just, I don't know. I like the bass at the beginning. It sounds really cool.
Yeah, and I'll interject right there. I was actually, this is one of my general thoughts for this whole album, was that I really like the tone and the sound of the bass throughout the entire album. It's very prominent, and I think it sounds really good. That was one of the notes I made is It just sounds really nice and full. And there's a lot of cool parts where the bass isn't necessarily like crazy flashy or anything, but just the way it's performed and how it just all fits together. I really like the bass overall in this album. So it's interesting that you mentioned that because that was one of my main points too.
I do really like Things I Can't Change. That was one of the ones that was always kind of more on repeat for me when I was listening, like at the time. I remember we had like a handful of their songs on the computer and stuff. Like we didn't have like their full albums or like their full discography. But this was like one of the ones that I always really liked and would listen to a lot in high school.
Yeah, I don't have a ton of points on this one either, but I did want to shout out, I really enjoy on timestamp of 2 minutes and 12 seconds, the lyrics. This is during the kind of the outro-ish part, but there's lyrics that says, "The calm and talk you seldom bring." And during there's one part of 2 minutes, 12 seconds where he holds out those last two words, or mainly the last word, bring. And he has this really cool harmony where he sings like this higher harmony to his normal melody. It sounds really, really nice. That's something that stands out, especially since it's drawn out really far. Yeah. This is like one of the highlights for me on this song is that long drawn out harmony on that vocal. It sounds really, really cool. I didn't have anything else specific on this one, but I'm just looking on, at least on Spotify, it shows you how many plays a song has. And this one is the second most played on this album. It's right under 34 million plays on Spotify. Wow. Which is, it's pretty good. Their next highest one, or the highest one, is Empty Space, track 6. We'll get to that one. That one's at 40 million streams. The rest are sitting at around 11 million, 8 million, 9 million.
Wow.
So to kind of put into context, Things I Can't Change is their second most popular, streaming-wise at least, by a pretty good chunk.
Yeah.
But, cool. I agree. It's not necessarily my favorite. It's definitely very influential and, like, powerful, I think. But not too many thoughts from me on a personal level.
Yeah. Cool. Well, we can just head over to Stifled then, track 2. Just generally with the album, what I do love about it is that, and I didn't really notice it until I was going through and preparing for this, is that Parker lyrically, I see this lyrical theme of like being away, I assume like on tour and stuff. This was their sophomore album, so they've been touring and stuff at this point, and like they've like been away from home and whatever. But I there's like this theme of like being away while life at home is still kind of going on. I've caught a handful of, I mean, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 songs that I specifically picked out that I could see prominently in the lyrics that were related to this theme, and I thought that was really cool. There was also a theme of like monotony. This song at the beginning, he says, "Overseas while you're back west, sleeping off this restlessness," and then "Stifled there, but you still walk in place." I don't know exactly what he means by that, but there's this prominence of like life is kind of almost moving on without him in a way, which I really like that lyrical theme that he keeps throughout the album that I didn't really notice until now. I don't know if you have any thoughts on Stifled specifically, but...
Yeah, I've got 2. At 9 seconds, he sings the lyrics. 9 seconds, he says, "Just got to keep my mind on your bed and your bed on my mind." So kind of go along with what you were saying with like the distance, how life might be moving on. He's trying to keep his mind on home or whatever. One thing that I like about this, I had to look up what the grammatical thing is, but this does the same thing that State Champs does in their song Frozen, where they say the same line, but they like flip the words. So my mind on your bed on my mind. Just like how in Frozen, it's like, it has all the different things of like, you got to count the minutes or want to make every minute last, and then however it is, I totally just blanked on it super hard right now. But you know what I'm talking about.
I love that.
That theme or that grammatical structure, whatever it is called, I had to look this up and hopefully I pronounce it right. It's called an antimetabole, where you say the same words but you like flip them or reverse them. So I always like those things in lyrics always stick out to me when they say the same words but then they flip them around, and it kind of like has the same meaning, but it's kind of different at the same time. It's just kind of a cool little, it's not symbolic, whatever the word is, just like a grammatical, cool, kind of poetic-y type thing, an antimetabole. So anyway, I thought that was cool. And then the one thing musically that I really like at the 40-second mark, if you listen, the rhythm guitar sounds really, really cool, because what it's doing is, this is actually really unique. I don't think I've or at least no other song comes to mind where I've heard this, where the rhythm guitar bounces back and forth between the left channel and the right channel. But what's interesting is there's basically always, one guitar is always doing palm mutes while the other one is doing open notes, like accented, but then that's flips between the left and right. So for example, one part, the left will be palm muting while the right ear is open. And then right after that, the right ear will mute, and then the left side is open with the power chords that they're playing. It sounds really, really cool. If you go back and listen again at the 40-second mark, it just has this really cool bouncing effect where there's always a muted note and there's always an open note being played at the same time. But because they're bouncing between the left and right channels, it just has this really cool bouncing effect that makes it sound is very unique. I think it's really cool. That was one standout thing that I wanted to mention about this from a musical standpoint.
Yeah, that's cool.
It's pretty interesting and fairly unique. But that's pretty much it for my thoughts on Stifle.
Yeah. That's cool. This is something that, like, having two different brains on this is really cool. Because, like, I love the English aspect of it with my English major brain and, like, the lyrics and, like, the vocals and whatnot. And so that's really cool that you noticed that. Now I want to go back and listen to it. Track 3 is called Small Talk. I feel like when I was younger, I would always, like, this was the song that, like, when this song came up, I, like, skipped it a lot for some reason, and I don't know why, because I've always really liked Parker's way of writing, like, just the way that he writes his lyrics. He's very, he includes, like, a lot of metaphors and stuff. I really like the imagery in this song. Of all the roads I took the wounded way, of all the words that you chose to say, there was only 3 that held any weight. The rest was all just small talk. I don't know. I mean, I could just, like, read the whole thing as, like, a poem. I mean, that's what I love about Parker's lyrics, is that he was my favorite lyricist, like, of all time for a while until I got into Jimmy Eat World, and Jim became, like, my favorite poet, I guess, musically. But anyway, I really like, he says, I bite back with broken teeth. I've always loved that imagery. I don't know why, but, like, that was the one line that I really did like, I guess. I don't know. It has this cool, like, you can visualize that in your head, and it's just, like, so, like, edgy and cool. I don't know. Mm-hmm. I really like the way that he writes his songs.
Yeah, can I cut in for a sec on some of those songs? Mm-hmm. So, yeah, I wrote down some of the exact same things. So, a preface for this, this is the song that I have the most notes on, and this is my absolute favorite on this album. This song is, like, what sold me. I was like, oh, crap, like, this song is so good. And it's good for a lot of reasons. So I'll touch on the points that you mentioned first. So, yeah, you mentioned the very first opening lyrics. This whole song, obviously, is about this relationship that he's in, or kind of a past relationship, obviously based on some of the lyrics, where he says, you know, of all the words that you chose to say, there were only 3 that held any weight. And obviously whenever you're talking about 3 words, it's always I love you, right? Mm-hmm. And so, and then he says the rest was all just small talk. So, like, the only 3 words that actually mattered was, you know, these 3 words, I love you, and the rest was just kind of like throwaway. And he kind of goes into that in the second verse as well, when he says, I sense your purpose, so tense inside, yet not on the surface. And then he says, and if this is worth it, then why is there still small talk? You know, he's talking about, like, if this relationship is still worth being in, or if, you know, if this is something that we're going to continue moving forward with, like, you know, why do we still have this small talk? Why aren't we talking about deeper issues? Why aren't we talking about things that we, you know, go deeper into each other, as opposed to just, oh, you know, how was your day? And, oh, yeah, the weather's nice. You know, like, just the typical small talk stuff, right? And so this whole song is kind of just that concept of, like, being in that relationship, but maybe it's a little bit shallow. Mm-hmm. Maybe there's not a lot of depth to this relationship because, you know, they say they love each other or whatever, but he keeps talking about, you know, the rest is all just small talk, right? Like, there's nothing else that holds any weight. There's other things I'll go into, but I wanted to touch on those that you mentioned there. And then I also says, you know, now it's going back to, there was only 3 that held any weight. The rest was all just small talk. And then he goes on to say, you know, now it's said with past tense for the sake of moving past this. Mm-hmm. You know, it's like, so instead of saying, I love you, now it's like, okay, I need to move forward. I'm breaking away from this relationship. So I have to say, I loved you, right? Like, the past tense, like, in order to move on, like, I can't keep saying that I love you. You know, he says, now it's said with past tense for the sake of moving past it, right? So I think that part lyrically is really cool, not only because it rhymes, but it also is like pretty powerful. It's like, oh crap, like he never says it explicitly, like, but it's kind of a cool roundabout way or beating around the bush of kind of telling this story of this relationship. So I think that's really cool. I'll stop there. I'll turn it back to you though.
No, that is way cool. I love other people's thoughts on this, because there are times when I will like grasp lyrics immediately, and then there are other times where and it always happens when I'm listening to the song passively for some reason. Like I'm not like actively listening to a song, and that's like when I'll gain the most out of it for some reason. But I have never like dove into that at all. Like you just blew my mind, and it's so obvious though now. Like it's so like that's obviously what he's talking about, but I just like never listened to it, I guess.
Yeah, well, one more thing that I forgot to mention, kind of going along with the lyrics, then we can kind of change subject. Also going towards the end, or towards the bridge, there's a lyric part I really like, and then also a musical part I really like. So going along with that part of the relationship is strained type thing, where he's talking about he needs to move on. In the chorus, kind of like what you mentioned, he says, "'Cause you're breaking into me, tell me how you think it's going to be, I'll bite back with broken teeth, so helpless." Kind of the biting back with broken teeth. I imagine this is like an argument. Like the first line, "'Cause you're breaking into me," is like, I don't know if this is 100% accurate, but I imagine it's like the person he's in a relationship with is like digging into him, or like calling him out on something, or they're arguing or whatever. They're breaking into him. And then he says he'll bite back with broken teeth. So even though, he's hurt from that, and he, is struggling with his own things and his own broken state in this relationship, like you mentioned, he's going to bite back with broken teeth. Like he has things on his mind too. And I think that is kind of cool. I always loved that line whenever I listen to the song, that I'll bite back with broken teeth. It sounds cool because of the alliteration, but it's also just really powerful, and the vocals as well, when he says bite back, like he has this extra punch to it that just really is really, really powerful and sick. And then the last part I wanted to mention about the relationship thing is the bridge, the part where it says this gap between us grows on.
Yes.
And then the last thing I want to do is move on. This gap between us grows on. I think that's really cool as well, because he recognizes the fact that, he's in this relationship, and that, all they have right now is small talk, right? They don't have anything more than that. It's just the surface level, whatever. They say they love each other, but the gap is growing on. And the last thing he wants to do is move on. Like he wants to hold on to this relationship, and he, he doesn't want to move on, but he recognizes by repeating the line, this gap between us grows on.
Yeah.
I think there's some cool kind of symbolicness, with that, or just recognizing that he knows that relationship might not be going anywhere, but he really doesn't want to move on, but, the gap still grows on.
Right.
Sorry about like that. That was it as far as I had for the lyrics. But
Sweet. Was there anything else with this track?
Yeah. There's like three more things. Like I said, this one was
like
the biggest one for me.
Keep it going.
I'll try and make it quick.
You're good.
So we can get to the other ones. This song, Small Talk, also definitely, like I said, it's my overall favorite on the album, but it definitely gets the reward for the best chorus for this album. I think the chorus is really, really awesome for two reasons. First one is it uses what I like to call the Degenerates effect. And so what that means is there's a song by A Day to Remember called Degenerates. Have you heard that song?
Yeah.
Yeah. So in that song, the intro is the same as the chorus. And every time throughout that song, Degenerates, the chorus is always, it only has the vocals and then like that lo-fi kind of bouncing bass, but there's no guitars, there's no drums, there's no loud craziness, except for the very last chorus. After the big heavy breakdown bridge, it cuts out, and then you hear the opening line to the chorus, my friends are degenerates, and then all of a sudden, all of the instruments punch in for the last chorus, and it's like this huge, like, head-banging, awesome chorus. And the reason why it's so powerful is because all the other choruses and intros and stuff leading up to that part just had that lo-fi bass sound, and there was no drums, no guitars, no huge head-banginess to it.
Right.
And so for that very last chorus, boom, punches in super hard, and you're like, holy crap, this chorus is awesome. And so that's what this song does as well. I call it the Degenerates effect, where the first chorus is really low-key and chill. It just has this little hi-hat thing that the drummer's doing, very light lead guitar, very, very kind of quiet and empty feeling. And then once you get into the second chorus, there's a huge build-up leading into it, and then all of a sudden all the instruments are there for that second chorus, and it really like punches super hard. So I really like that, how the contrast between the first chorus and the second chorus. That's what makes part of it super, super good. And I also wanted to lead up with the second verse leading into that big chorus. The first half of the song is a little bit quieter. As soon as you hit the second verse, first of all, I love the rhythm guitar. It's super, super sick how it just punches in for a few notes and then cuts out, and then there's a little lead guitar playing a higher note, and then it punches back in with the rhythm guitar a couple of times, and then it goes back up to that higher note. So it's this constant bouncing back and forth between the super aggressive and like a biting kind of sound for the electric guitar, and then it goes up to the high part, kind of the higher lead, and then again it bites back in. Really, really sick, especially with some of the lyrics, how he's talking about, he repeats them from the first verse, but the lyrics going along with the aggressiveness of the guitar is really, really sick. I think the overall kind of arrangement of that is really, really good. And then also during the second half of the second verse is when the drums start kicking in. It's constantly playing notes, and the bass is constantly droning on instead of cutting in and out with the electric guitar. So just this overall composition of this second verse is really, really cool, because the first half, you have the really cool, again, biting electric guitar, and it cuts out, and then it cuts back in, cuts back out, cuts back in, cuts back out. And then the second half, the electric guitar still does that, but the bass guitar is constantly there, droning on and on and on, and the drums really start kicking in with faster snares, faster bass drum, and all this leads up into the big, boom, degenerates effect of the big chorus. Arrangement-wise, composition-wise, I think this whole song basically is really, really good, specifically for kind of those reasons, with that build-up. That was it. I just think it's great composition for the second verse leading into that second chorus. A lot of really good stuff going on there musically, in my opinion. And I think that the last part I wanted to mention is at the timestamp 1 minute 45 seconds. The lyrics, we already talked about this gap between us grows on. It's interesting because the first time he sings this part, so the full set of lyrics is, this gap between us grows on, the last thing I want to do is move on. And then he repeats, this gap between us grows on. So the first line of this gap between us grows on, the last word on, when he holds that out longer, the harmony of the vocal is really, really cool, because he's singing, if you're familiar with music theory, he's singing his normal vocal melody is the fifth note of the scale of the key that they're in. And then the harmony he's singing is the seventh. And so that gives like a really dissonant kind of harmony sound, singing that seventh note of the scale of the key they're in, which is the note right before the root note, which is kind of the main like resolving, nice, clean sounding note. But the first time he sings it with the seventh, and then the next line, the last thing I want to do is move on, when he holds out the word on, instead of singing that seventh, he sings it as just a half step higher, which is the root note. And so it's a really nice, clean harmony. And then the same thing for this last repeated, this gap between his grows on, is that clean root note resolving. So the contrast that I would really like is that first line. He sings the harmony is the seventh, so it's like just the note right before it sounds like it should be resolved, and there's some tension. And then when he sings the next lines, he bumps that up to the root note, and harmonically it sounds much cleaner, much more pure, much more clear. So it's a really nice use of just some of the harmonies there on the vocals. I think that part really impressed me as well. All that said, that's all I had for this song. But like I said, this is definitely my favorite song on the album. A lot of things stick out to me musically, lyrically. It's got a lot going for it, in my opinion. But that's all I had. So
awesome! I love all of that. That was great. Now I want to go back and listen to this song.
Yeah, no, this song. Yeah, I'm surprised you said this one was the one you did really like. Yeah. So I was like, this is like the song for me.
That's so funny.
So anyway,
how we all listen to music differently.
Yeah.
Track 4 is called "Playing the Victim." So one of the first things that I wrote for some reason was I really love their live acoustic version of this song. There's a video on YouTube. They're playing it at Banquet Records, and this was they're playing this song. It was the first time they had ever played it without the full band, and I just love the contrast of this live version that they did it of this song, because Parker sings it much lower and softer rather than he calls it yelling on key. It's like how he describes his voice, which I love. I think that's awesome because that's exactly what it is. I don't know why that was the first thing that I really love this song, and I love the way that they did it in that acoustic version. But reading back the lyrics again, if there's something that I didn't really take much notes on this one, other than the fact that this was one of the ones that I feel like I played a lot more on this album when I was younger, as opposed to other ones. But I don't know if there's any specific reasons at the moment that I can think of as to why, but what are your thoughts on this one?
Yeah, this one I only had one from a musical standpoint. The chorus is interesting in this song because normally the chorus is kind of the most... Usually a lot of choruses, just in pop punk and most songs in general, they start with the root note or the key of the song as kind of their bass line for the chorus, and they bounce around and obviously have the progressions and stuff. But this song is interesting because the whole progression is really just one note. I didn't get the specific note that the key is in for reference of like which note it's actually playing, but it's not the root note, and it doesn't sound as structured, I guess, as other choruses. Basically, it just plays this one note over and over for the main punchy part, and then as it transitions into like the second half, it just does one little note change to transition into it, but then it punches back into that single note for pretty much the whole chorus, which is kind of interesting because, again, usually the chorus is like the most moving aspect. It's got a lot of chord changes that sound cool or whatever, but this one is pretty much just the one note over and over, and then the little transition, and then the same note again over and over and over, a little transition. So from a musical aspect, I thought that was interesting, kind of unique. Not a lot of choruses do that, so I thought that was cool.
I feel like when I was going back through this the second time, I really liked the line, "It's rough when we're both square one, with so much undone, who lost, who won, all rain, no sun." I really liked, I don't know if it's necessarily a metaphor. I should know what that means, but that's the first thing that comes to my mind is just, Parker, with his lyrics, he just incorporates a lot of, like, so much, like, what were you saying before about, like, not necessarily beating around the bush, but, like, just the vibe of, like...
Yeah, he, like, doesn't say it directly, but he, like, swerves around it with his words. Like, you can piece it together.
Like, describes things.
But he doesn't just say it explicitly, though.
Yeah. But there's, like, a beauty about it, like, his words that he uses that I really love. He does mention, now that I think about it, waking up to gloom and routine again. And that just kind of goes back to that theme of monotony and just the same things over and over again. And I really like, there's a handful of those just lyrics that pop out that kind of go with that theme, and I thought that was cool. Yeah,
and one other thing, as you mentioned that, there's parts, I don't remember exactly, I think it's in the second verse or first verse or something. So now I just sing about missing this and missing that,
yes.
But what will it really bring? So it's kind of that thing, that longing for these things that he's leaving behind or he's missing. And he says he can sing about it, but, like, what does that really give him? You know, it's like he wants the real thing. So going along with that thought, I like that as well.
Yeah, I love that him talking about singing and stuff. It goes along with a track later on called All Wrong when he talks about songs and stuff, and we'll get to that, but I like there's similarities with the lyrics there too. Track 5 is called Right Here.
Mm-hmm.
The only thing that I wrote down for this one was I just wrote drums before bridge, like the drums before the bridge. I really, really love, and I'm trying to remember now how it sounds, so I might have to, like, play it back a little. It was that right there. Oh, man.
Oh, yeah.
Everybody that I've ever talked to, or just with my Instagram, because I have a Story So Far fan account page thing on Instagram, and just, like, looking on Reddit and stuff, everybody is, like, everyone really loves this drummer, Ryan Torf, and they claim him to be, like, one of the best in the pop-punk realm, and I can see why. I'm not, like, a drum person. I know you play drums, so you probably, like, catch drum things a lot more. I don't know. Do you have any, like, thoughts on how cool that was, or?
Yeah, so I intentionally, I guess I kind of left out a lot of those drum-related things because, yeah, like you said, I obviously play drums. I know how to play quite a few different Story So Far songs. None on this particular album, I don't think. None of these ones spoke to me quite enough, but there's a couple of songs. For example, Small Talk also has an incredible drum intro after the long, so it opens up with a long open chord, and then the drums kick in with this really cool, and like it does this like super fast kind of intro fill, and then it punches back in. So yeah, similar with this song here, it's got that cool, it's like a triplet rhythm or something, and then it comes back in. It has this really nice fill. There's a lot of other impressive drum parts that I didn't mention a bunch of, but yeah, going along with what you were saying, I didn't recognize how technical he was. After listening through to different fills and even just things that he's doing, especially when he's not just hitting the hi-hat during like a verse or something, when he's doing a little bit more technical things, he's bouncing around to a lot of different cymbals in like these unexpected places that sound really, really cool. It all blends together really well with the other instruments, so it's not super easy to like pick out, or you wouldn't hear it super directly. But yeah, he does a lot of crazy kind of technical things that are really cool, and I never really noticed it until listening through this album a few times really, really closely. I was like, oh wow, like I don't think I could play that. Like if I just sat down at a drum kit right now, like I would definitely have to practice that. You know, there's a couple of different things that came up. That one included that you mentioned, so I definitely agree. He's really technical, more so than I gave him credit for after or before listening to these. But that's it for me.
Cool.